it is now June, and I'm going to end up going into my anti-Oscars rant. There's no way I'm getting through this podcast without ranting against it. First of all, we have Mr. J. Bevs on once again, and as always, Mr. Rainwater. Gentlemen, did you guys watch the Academy Awards this year? I mean, granted, I think it was probably the lowest rated season or version ever. Do you guys normally watch the Academy Awards? That's the better question.
I haven't watched it in years, man.
Same. I think the last time I watched it was maybe when I think Spirited Away won an award for best. That tells you how long ago. I mean, it's like a decade or so ago.
And did you watch with the intention of, this film that I absolutely love is nominated for something I wanted to win, or did you just watch because there was nothing else to do?
I'm a massive weeb, so anime getting an Academy Award was a pretty big deal for me that year.
How about you, Joe?
I feel like I used to never watch it, but I would go through the list of Best Picture movies and watch those after.
After?
Yeah, just because I was like, I missed all these, so let me check them out.
Yeah.
And
that
makes sense.
I would watch when I do watch, and I do watch, don't get me wrong. I watch for whoever the host is to see their opening monologue when they inevitably just kind of roast whoever's nominated and sitting right in front of them. And then, I'll try and just, tune out of it and go and do something else, or just watch when the host pops back up, or if some crazy shit happens where somebody runs on stage during naked during an acceptance speech or some shit that, because I just want to be up on the whole pop culture aspect of it. But I used to have a tradition, I guess I would call it, before I was married. When the Oscars would be airing, it would be on a Sunday, and as always, that was my night to go in. This is what it was a stupid thing to go in protest of the Oscars. And this is what I did. I would go to the movie theater and I would specifically pick which movie I think looked the absolute worst, biggest waste of my fucking time, and pay to go see that movie instead of watching the Oscars. Because for me, and this is the title of our podcast, which everybody knows because they've clicked on the title, competition in art is the biggest fucking crock of shit that there could ever be. And I hate the fact that it exists. It's like a marketing campaign. It's just to me, that's the entire point of it, is to get a title that literally means nothing, and slap it above somebody's name when they run it through a trailer for the next movie. And that's supposed to sell the audience that this movie is going to be good because they worked on that movie and they got an award for it.
Right.
To me, it doesn't mean it means absolutely nothing more than that. At least that the Oscars, at the very least. I'm sure at some point during this conversation, I'll get into my spiel about film festivals. However, we will go with the wonderful politeness, I guess is the words. But I'm curious to know our guest's perspective on competition in art. So, Mr. Joe Bevill, please enlighten us to your point of view as to how you feel about competing within art.
So when you're talking about awards and stuff, I think about was it the Grammys last year? The Weeknd had the #1 album, #1 sales. He was #1 on the Billboard.
I remember this.
And he didn't win.
Was he even nominated?
Wow.
I feel like he wasn't even nominated, right?
I don't even think he was even nominated. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a few years ago too, Kendrick Lamar lost to the guy that did that Thrift Shop song or whatever.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
And it was one hit wonder, came and went. But it's just kind of I feel like a lot of stuff will go underrepresented, and then really bland things win, or it's just it's not a really good way of gauging what art is. Art is gonna be subjective,
right?
And so I don't know. It's just kind of, yeah, in that sense, really worthless.
Right.
I will say though, like when you talk about art, like competition in terms of like between people, I think people get caught up in that too. You know, like there could be friendly competition. Like when you think of like the Beatles and the Beach Boys back in the day, where they were
Sure.
going tit for tat with albums, and like I don't think anyone hated anybody, but
Right.
Yeah.
they were watching what the other was doing. You know.
Well, that's something that, like, for myself, like, when I do, that is the kind of competition that is fun. Like,
Yes. Yeah.
that I'm into when it's like you were saying, friendly competition between people who are like, each is trying to one up the other, or like try and find things that the other hasn't found, and then they kind of take from each other, you know, what they've discovered, and it keeps building and building on itself. But
It's
to
kind
go
of
to
Rainwater. I think what you're trying to say is that there's a level of respect between the artists.
Yeah.
Like there's an
well, and
acknowledgement.
that's what's important, right? That's what's important in any kind of competition is you have to maintain some kind of respect between all the individuals involved.
Right.
And I think it's interesting because in the award show, theoretically there's respect between everybody who is involved as the artists, but that's never really something that's ever brought to the attention of the audience. It's kind of like
A little bit when they thank their fellow nominees.
Sure,
Yeah.
but it's not something that I feel like it's not something that we're thinking about generally when
Sure.
we're watching an award show. We're like, yeah, I want, you know, my person to win, or I want my film to win, or, you know, like,
Yeah.
fuck everything else. I want my anime, you know, to win. And so, and you know, that's any competition. Like, that's not just art or whatever. It's interesting too, because like something that I was just thinking about when we were talking about this topic. Frequently, I will, you know, if I find like a sci-fi novel or whatever I'm interested in, there'll never inevitably be some sort of like, you know, Hugo or Nebula award winner or whatever. And I think this is something that you're kind of implying, Jao, was that something I've discovered about a lot of, and this is particularly in writing, a lot of people who win awards for science fiction books, they're not doing great financially. Like the award ends up being kind of just like very, you know, fingers crossed, like this might help pay off for somewhere further down the road. And this kind of goes back to your point about like, you know, oftentimes awards exist more for the point of promotion. So like comics has the Eisner Awards that are commonly presented at the San Diego Comic-Con. I've never really participated in the Eisner Awards much. There are people who have won Eisner Awards who I respect and am glad that they won Eisner Awards and been acknowledged. But at the same time, I'm not usually attracted to any particular story in comics specifically because they won an award. It's usually kind of like, oh, okay, this is something that people within the industry have voted on, which is typically how it works. And it's usually based on, you know, people who know each other being like, oh, you know, I think that person deserves, you know, acknowledgement this year. So when you kind of take that into account, it really takes out the idea of, part of the idea of competition is this idea that you're having a comparison of quality between two different things, right? And the thing of greater quality will win the award, when usually it's sort of like the person who has the more connections wins the award within that given set. And so in that respect, I kind of just like, you know, hand wave awards away. And like I said, you know, it's great when people get acknowledgement that I want to get acknowledgement, but it's a totally selfish aim. So anyway.
I think that's, like you mentioned, the financial part of it. I think that's the same for like comics and films too. Like most of the like, until they win, they're not doing well. And so like an award itself is probably not a great goal.
Yeah.
You know? Which I know there has to be people who like do very like, I don't know, like dramatic serious things in the attempt to do that.
Yep.
And that award is probably not going to have the outcome you want.
Well, that's kind of what happened to me. When I was writing my screenplay for Haunted, one of the things that I absolutely sought after, and this is I'm going to play both sides of the fence here when it comes to this discussion, but it was a little bit of a temporary benefit to me. One of the things that I did was I submitted to a whole bunch of screenplay festivals, and initially on the first draft, which I was a dumbass, I shot this thing out in a weekend, right? I wrote it in like 3 days, and then I turned around and shot it out to all these film festivals thinking, man, I'm going to clean the fuck up. Got into none of them. Got rejected all over, and it was a nice way for me to kind of ego check myself, and go, because you have an opportunity. There's a choice to be made when that happens, when you get rejected. And there's two ways to look at it. You can either go, they don't know anything, fuck them, I know I'm great. Or you can take a step back and go, all right, maybe I need to reevaluate what I did here. Let me look at what I did and see if I got to fix some stuff. And it turned out I did. I needed to fix a lot. I was rereading it like a couple, because it takes months for them to respond. It was a couple months later. I reread the script and I'm like, who the fuck wrote this? This is stupid. That doesn't make sense. And I started realizing that in the midst of, writing the script, the things that I saw in my head were there on the page, but not described in a way that executed the way I saw in my head. And I was like, I know what I was thinking when I wrote that, but this isn't conveying it now. So I have to rewrite this. And I rewrote it. It was basically the exact same script, the same story, same characters, the whole 9 yards. But the way in which I executed it, the words that I chose, all that kind of stuff was different. And then I thought, all right, let me give it another shot. And I did a couple more revisions, and I did the whole 9 yards, shot it out to screenplay festivals, and then boom, selection, boom, a winning.
Awesome.
And it just kept on coming. So that to me became a temporary, again, a boost, because it was not, I don't want to say an ego trip, but like we've talked about before, me and Rainwater, I know have, but validation as an artist is something that we're all, you can get it, and then tomorrow you're seeking it again. It's not, it's something that
doesn't take long.
It's not permanent. No. You know what I'm saying? So, but for a couple of days, I was riding high. I was like, yeah, man, I'm a fucking good writer. Look at all these awards that I won. And then it went too far for me, because then I started thinking, somebody's going to come and knocking. Somebody wants to buy this script and fund the movie and da-da-da. And here I am 3-4 years later, and I don't have a financier. I don't have, all that kind of stuff. And I started realizing, man, what the fuck are these goddamn film festivals for? What are these competitions doing? Like, I got exposure. I got, like, you know what I mean? Like, people read the script that were supposedly industry professionals. I got no emails, no phone calls, no offers, none of that jazz. So then I started thinking to myself, this is all just a fucking cash grab from people who are outside the industry trying to break their way in. And yeah, maybe they chose the script that they like the best, or the film that they like the best, but what comes of that? Nothing. I lost $70 per festival that I submitted to, and I get back a little laurel I can throw on the poster. Guess what I can do? I can market with that. And that's the end all be all. And then I started thinking to myself, well, fuck it. Why don't I just invent 12 film festivals and stick those fake laurels on the poster? No one will know the fucking difference. And so I guess that what I'm leading you, that left me bitter and cold towards festivals. But the question that I'm working towards with you gentlemen is, have either of you ever submitted to festivals, competitions, whatever, within your particular mediums, and what were your experiences with that? And since we asked Joe last time first, I will defer to Rainwater this time.
Well, it's interesting that you asked that question, because my current job is because I entered into a competition, basically, by the suggestion of Joe, actually. And this was I guess in 2018, Webtoon had been doing a competition for I think they call it the Discovery Contest. And so basically the idea is people submit their stories to Webtoon and run it for like 10 weeks. And so I ran Trailer Park Warlock for 10 weeks. And I noticed, like, first of all, I had never submitted that story in its entirety in front of a bigger audience where I could get immediate feedback. And so that alone was like super validating, because while it wasn't a lot, it was like, I think at a certain point there was like 3,000 people who were subscribed, giving feedback, talking about it. It's like, oh, this is cool. Like, I've never really experienced it at this level. I didn't win any of the levels. Like, I didn't get first place, second place, third place. I got like an honorary mention, and I was like, okay, I guess that's it.
Yeah.
You know, it was a nice ride. I kind of I got validation that I wanted, that people liked the story. The story I made was something that was good, and I just let it hang up. And then a couple weeks later, I get contacted by an editor at Webtoon, and he's like, hey, you know, we like your story. Would you like to, you know, sign on with us and publish it with us? I was like, yeah, okay. It was really random, because for me, I was like, this is, you know, it's done. You know, like, I'm done with Trailer Park Warlock. We're not going to, that's it, you know? And then now I'm on season 4. Like, I'm working on season 4 now. So
Oh yeah.
I would,
That's awesome.
it's interesting just to comment on that. It's like, there's a part of me that looks at art contests and art competitions to a certain extent. There's this, for a long time in the comics community, in illustration, there was this idea talked about don't do work for exposure, right? Because the idea is you're being used, basically. And a lot of contests and competitions sort of feed off of that, especially like internet stuff, right? Where it's like, oh, you're going to put up content, we make money from the page views and all this other stuff. You're kind of just giving us money.
Yeah.
For, you know, at the expense of your own time and energy. I have to say, from personal experience, there are outliers to that, right? Sometimes you're taking a bet, you're taking a gamble, but sometimes it pays off. You have to be willing to take, you know, you have to be willing to do that risk assessment. For me, like, I was in a position where I had finished a story a couple of years ago, and there wasn't anything up front for me to lose in terms of time and energy. So that's why that worked out. That's not everybody's situation. So I just say that as like a way to consider, you know, if you have a story that you've made or a movie or whatever that you're like, you know, brush off the cans, there's a contest going on, it might be worth submitting just for the hell of it. You know what I mean? Sometimes for the hell of it works out. It depends, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, Joe, would you have it for yourself, any examples of contests or competitions that you've exhibited with?
So I actually did that Webtoon contest too.
That's right.
Yeah, and that was it was good for me because it was just a motivator to actually complete pages.
Yeah.
Because, you know, for years before, it was just kind of like ideas, sketches, notes, and that gave me like something to actually focus on, lock
Give
in,
you a deadline.
have.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've
It
learned
was awesome
over the
for me,
years.
too. 'Cause I enjoyed reading Cotton.
Thank you.
That was fun.
But yeah, I've learned over the years that if I don't have something structured like that, then it'll probably never see the light of day. But one of my first competitions was actually in high school. I won an American Vision Award. Just like some scholastic contest thing. I don't know. But like the high school I went to, the art department was like full of these like just monster oil painters and like traditional drawing. And I was doing cartoony stuff, and I knew like I always felt out of place because I felt like I couldn't necessarily like match up to them.
Yeah.
And so when we approached the competition, I said, well, you know, fuck this, I'll do something different. And I actually did like I built a bass guitar.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, like a working,
Awesome.
functioning thing. And I submitted films too, and because I did these shorts, and I won like a silver for the film, and then like the national award for the guitar.
Wow.
Nice.
And you know, and basically what I got out of that is I got scholarship money to SCAD.
Oh, whoa! I didn't know that.
Yeah. But that said,
That's all gone now.
Yeah, like
That was gone the moment you won it.
yeah, I think it was like the first 2 quarters of Scad maybe were covered, and then that was it.
That's pretty significant, though. I'll give you that.
Yeah, but I mean, it's one of those things though where like I feel like it was helpful to me in the sense of like being surrounded by people that are, I'm doing air quotes right now for people just listening, like better than me at something. It like that doesn't like diminish what I do necessarily. And I think that goes for everybody too. Like, you know, if you're looking at yourself in comparison to others, you know, just because they're having successes or they're doing something special, that doesn't mean that you're not too, or not capable of it.
Yeah.
See, now I'm curious to know, to go down that rabbit hole a little bit, because just recently there was a film festival that was open to me. It was absolutely free. Okay, there was no cost to enter, and I was considering dusting off digits and submitting it.
Oh shit!
Just because when I first did digits, when I did that, I was unfamiliar with the landscape of film festivals and such, and I only thought there was like Sundance and like Cannes, and like that was it. And so I submitted to those things, just thinking, okay, these are my shot, and then I got rejected from like the three of them, and that was it. And I thought, oh, okay, that's it. Those are the only film festivals that there are, because that's all you hear about for mainstream stuff. Nowadays, it's a different story. Obviously, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of film festivals. So anyway, a one that recently came up for me was absolutely free. They were looking for no budget movies and this and that. And I thought, you know what? Maybe I can go, and there's a couple of things on digits I can do a couple trims on, and I can just show it and have it get seen by people who aren't friends and family. And just, you know, why not? See if it'll happen. And I was on the good old Twitter, and I saw some other people who were talking about their submissions, and they posted like trailers to their films. And I'm looking, and you got to remember, Digits was made in 2009. So the accessibility of the camera quality and all that stuff was significantly less than it is these days. And I'm looking at trailers from people who have shot stuff within the last year who clearly either had a fucking budget or know somebody who's got like an RE Flex, Red Dragon, the crazy $100,000 digital cameras that that's their thing. And they had, you know, stuff shot on that and all this kind of stuff. I didn't even bother to edit digits. I was like, there's no way in hell I'm going to be able to compete with that. Now, sitting here discussing with you guys right now, I kind of regret that. I kind of wish I had, you know, thrown up my middle finger and said, no, this is the no budget one. And fuck you, Mr. $1,000 camera. Look at me. But I didn't.
I will argue. I guess I might be I will argue for doing things on a lark, because I've had two, I've had two things work out for me because I did it on a lark, and it doesn't mean do it all the time, but nevertheless, I think there's sometimes when there's nothing to lose, why the hell not? You know.
Well, see, and that leads to me where I was getting with my question though, because earlier I mentioned about how getting accepted or nominated or winning or whatever can be completely validating. But what we didn't discuss was the other direction it can go, because that first round when I submitted Haunted and it got rejected on all fronts, man, that fucking devastated me. It was, you know what I mean? Like, that's a real, like, kick in the nuts about, you know, do I belong here? Should I keep on this dream? Do I keep wasting time and money and sacrificing, you know, memories with loved ones and all these, you know, I don't want to say opportunities, but like other things I could be going towards in my life to try to chase this dream. So I'm curious to know from both of you gentlemen, have there been times when you've questioned the quality of your work versus others? Because like the competition factor can really smack you down when you get beat. You're just like, I can't compete with that. Look at the budget on this thing, or that guy's got way too many connections. There's no way anyone's going to hold a candle to him. He knows 3 people on the judging committee. Like, they're all going to vote. Like, you know what I'm saying? So I'm clear. Yeah. I'm curious to know, like, Joe and Rainwater, have you guys ever dealt with that kind of doubt, or you know what I mean? And like, what did you do? How did you respond to it?
I I can speak on that a little bit. When
Sure.
I first moved to Atlanta, I moved in with a buddy from school, and our other roommate, both of them work on a TV show here, Archer.
Oh wow.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, like, I'm meeting friends and like doing all this stuff, and all of a sudden, like, I went from being in Mississippi as like the only artist I know to like living with a house full of just like
Creatives. Yeah.
but extremely talented. Like,
Yeah.
wake up at 2 a.m. and I see the oil painting he's working on. I'm like, man, fuck you. Like just like super good, right? And so for a little bit when I first came here, I was kind of just like, man, I don't fit with this crew. Like, my work doesn't look like this, and like people are doing murals and stuff. And I was really in my head about it. And then I early on too, I submitted to Frederator. Do you know that company?
Yeah.
Oh what?
Frederator, they do pilots for animated shows.
Okay. I've never heard of them.
Yeah, they made like the pilot for like Adventure Time and Powerpuff Girls, I think, back in the day.
Okay.
But so I submitted a pitch. They were accepting storyboards for like, short episodic pitches, and I did one. And I was like staying up late, and I put all this work into it, and I sent it, and I actually got a response back, and they said no, but in retrospect, his critique actually wasn't harsh at all or anything like that. He basically was just saying like they could tell I was not opening up in terms of like humor and doing whatever. It was just kind of playing it safe. Which I was. I was like, I want this to get picked up, so let me not be dirty. Let me not,
Yeah.
be myself. And I like stopped working on stuff for a solid like month after that. Just kind of like, what the hell am I doing here? And over the years though, I've kind of like found a way of working that like, I make a living and like I'm kind of doing what I want to creatively. But that really shook me pretty bad.
That's interesting. Because I similarly did a pitch with Frederator, and this was me and my friend Austin, and they didn't give us any feedback. They were just like, it doesn't work for us.
Wait, so that was something I was going to mention is years later, now that I've like gone through the process of like hiring people and doing stuff like that, the fact that they wrote me and actually like took that time meant that I did pretty good.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking when you said that. Like, that's usually a pretty, it's not the response that you want, but it's a positive response.
It's like you made the world's best burger, and they were like, "Sir, this is a bakery. Like we're not going to serve this." But you know what I mean. But it was like, "Hey, you made a damn good burger." But me with my fucking food analogies. But
well,
still,
and I say this as I've been working on a side project that involves like doing queries with agents, and so I'm doing this project. I'm editing this book for some people. In part of the, you go through this process of like sending queries to agents and hoping you hear back from them.
Right.
Most of the time, you do not.
Right.
Like, agents will look at it, throw it away, and then move on. But if you do get a reply from an agent and they say, well, this project wouldn't work for us because X and X and X, that is like, in a lot of ways, it's a go-ahead of like, well, if you did these changes, we might go another step further. Or this is what you need to think about when you're querying other agents. Like, this is what you need to think about with your project and how you approach people who you want to take it in. And so, I mean, this is getting a little bit beyond our original topic, but at the same time, I think it's interlinked because ultimately it's about competition. Art competition is ultimately about getting people's attention, right? Mm-hmm. And so one of the things, all artists want attention, right?
Yes.
That's why it's part of the reason why we do it. It's part of what brings us back into this vicious cycle.
And we don't want to share the attention either. I want to make that a very, very important point. That's why they make you turn off your fucking phone when you walk into a movie theater.
Oh, yeah.
But no, that what you're raising is a valid point, because there is competition, and an agent's only going to pick up so many new clients a year. So there is competition there, and and that gets down to a side topic that we kind of briefly touched on earlier, which is the whole business aspect of it. You know what I mean? It's that becomes where you have to take your artist hat off and you got to put the business hat on, and you have to start thinking about, is this a good business move in terms of competing? And I've struggled with that a lot for a lot of things. So like I'm writing my martial arts film, The Indomitable Spirit, and a lot of people, and they constantly tell me this, they're like, listen, Hollywood is on the whole big inclusion kick now, and you have to have a diverse cast. You have to, have these particular components. And one of the main things in my particular screenplay is there are no Asian characters. It is 100% American martial arts. And the thing that I'm trying to convey to people is this is not the Karate Kid with, Mr. Miyagi. This is my personal experiences as a martial arts instructor, and I've molded it, obviously taking creative license to make a theme and ring some, I don't know if I want to call it morality, but some kind of an artistic through line with it. And could I take that liberty? Yes, I could just add in, generic Asian character because it's a good business move, and that will make me more competitive in a market, and it'll help me get chosen or looked at more, or considered. Because, some agents are fucking fickle. They'll look at it and go, there's no Asian characters in a martial arts film. This is going to get canceled by Twitter in 20 minutes of its trailer drop. Like, well, I'm not touching this with a 10-foot pole. So I'm struggling with the mentality of the art versus the business factor, because that competition factor of the market that we're in as artists, you have to be relevant. What's the word I'm looking for? Topical, I guess, or just with the times. What's the word I'm looking for here? Do you know what I'm saying?
Topical is a good word.
Okay, so we'll go with topical. Everybody knows what I mean, even if that's not the word. But so I'm struggling because part of me is like, I'm not shooting for now. I'm shooting for forever. Like, I want this to be a film that lasts the test of time. It's not a fad. It's not about what's going on in the industry right now. It's about this story and these characters. So I'm struggling with, do I do this because it's got to compete to even get seen? Because it's never going to be legendary if no one ever sees it. It's just not. Right. It's going to get lost to time. So I'm curious to know how you guys deal with the idea of adjusting your art for whatever factor it may be, to be competitive with other artists, whether it's a particular style of drawing or music or the content that you're creating, like the story or a particular character. Is there any kind of struggles relating to the competition within your market that you guys have dealt with in recent times?
I know in terms of like comics and illustration stuff, I feel like the kind of stuff I like to do is probably not the most in fashion thing right now. Like just taking Webtoon, for instance, I feel like most of the top stuff that is comic strip based is like couples, like but really sweet, silly relationship comics, and like manga looking romance comics.
Yeah.
And it's like those are all doing well, and I don't fit in those, so I pretty much just don't kind of worry about it because I don't.
That's a tricky thing too, because it's like Webtoon's core demographic is like high school to early college, like female. So like very specifically that I don't know, like very hardcore manga sort of crowd, right? And I get what you're saying, because it's like Trailer Park, speaking from personal experience, Trailer Park Warlock is like very unfashionable. And on the other hand, the audience that's into it is really into it because they don't see anything else like that on Webtoon.
Yeah.
And I would say, just in regard, kind of in response to what you're talking about, Joe, I mean, and this isn't just Webtoon, this is whatever, channel or venue. The things that stick out, even though they may not be picked up immediately, they'll continue to stick out perennially. you know.
Right.
So over time, so for example, like I would maybe make the argument that like for titles on Webtoon that are not anything like Webtoon's demographic, you're always going to have people who get tired, right? Of like the same romance story. Here's another empress who's fallen in love with prince, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
You know, like you can only do that so many times until they see something that's like, oh, that's unique, that's original, that's not like anything else on here. I want to check it out. And then because they have that hit, that's a contrast, they really get into it. And so it's more of a theoretical argument that I'm trying to make right now, but like the argument being, if you're willing to do sort of the long game of it, there is an audience, even when it seems like the audience is very small, but you also have the opportunity for having a more, I guess, rabid audience over time, you know, because there is an appeal of like, it's that appeal of like, oh, I used to like them before they were popular kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So
everybody wants to be the person who finds the big, you know, indie hit or whatever.
So it's kind of like your audience finds you kind of deal, where it's you just gotta kind of keep on trugging with what it is that you believe the next thing is. Like you are aiming to be the next fad, not necessarily a fad, but you get what I'm saying, like the next big thing.
It's a hard road to plow too, though.
It's a lonely road. That's, you know what I mean. And that's the thing is like you're walking it without a map and without anybody there to cheer you on or tell you that you know you're doing the right thing. Like you literally have to be crazy, and it's a road that I think a lot of artists get lost going down because they end up thinking to themselves, you guys just don't get it. And most of the time, it's because the artist is failing and not necessarily the audience. There is. I'm not saying there aren't times when the artist is like, "No, I'm ahead of you guys. You'll get there. Just catch up. Keep up with me." And
I mean, in a lot of ways, in a lot of respects, I feel like this podcast is kind of that thing because it's like we're not doing stocks. We're not doing, you know, like whatever other is the big. We're not doing UFOs or anything like that. So like. This is one of those things where you kind of wait for the slow drip to build into it because a lot of people don't yet realize that that's what they want. Not to, I mean, that's kind of a pompous thing to say, but you go ahead, Joe.
I was just gonna say, I feel like if you're thinking about it in terms of like money and making a living too, you do have to have this like hyper awareness of the market. But if you kind of lock in on trying to chase a trend or what you deem as popular, you're probably going to come in at the tail end of stuff every time.
Yes.
And something I see now too is like, I guess over the past couple of years, a lot of companies are catching heat for like trying to do LGBTQ.
They call it queer baiting, right? Isn't that what it is? Queer baiting?
Yeah. Yeah. And well, I think that's Billie Eilish has a thing with that right now.
Oh, is it? I don't know. I don't follow her.
Yeah, that's...
When you say, I'm just curious, Joe, when you say catching heat, like they're catching heat from audiences?
Yeah, like, well, like I see a lot of queer people like upset because it's like, you know, Target doesn't give a shit about these causes. And I think on one hand of that, like even working at a company like I do, like the people doing that kind of stuff, like we actually do care. But a lot of companies are doing it because it's like, it's definitely in vogue to speak out now. You know, like
it's in other words, it's a way of getting attention from people because it's like, oh, hey, we're talking about the thing that everybody's talking about, right? So let's talk about us. You know,
kind of like with the Burger King and the chicken sandwich thing, where they were trying to show up Chick-fil-A. No, I totally get that. And you gotta. They're trying to be competitive as well because you have to keep in mind. There's all it takes is one tweet from someone to say your silence is ignoring a problem or it's supporting the what's the word I'm looking for here? God, I'm a writer and I can't think of words tonight. Wow, I'm ashamed of myself. You're supporting suppression. That's kind of the idea. You know what I mean? So it's almost like they're trying to get ahead of being called. It's like, no, I'm not a racist. Look at this chicken sandwich. Like, it's one of those things. And And I'm curious to know, do you guys think that is another thing that, breeds insincerity with like the whole competition aspect of it? It's like, well, we have to do this fad because otherwise someone else is going to get ahead of us. Whereas, you know what I mean? Like that, like people, I'm not saying that artists themselves will do it, but like companies will choose specific things to get ahead. I'll even say there was a time a couple years ago, again, I was trying to get Haunted made, and Project Greenlight was coming back. And if anybody's unfamiliar with that, it was a television show on HBO, and they were looking for horror properties that they were going to produce to put on Shudder. And I was like, this is fucking perfect. I got my award-winning screenplay. I have a fucking camera, and I've got like a cast lined up. I've got a budget already, and like I'm fucking 9/10 of the way there. There's no way they're not going to pick me. I shot this awesome little promo video. I submitted it. I thought, this is it. I got it. And then didn't get selected. And I thought, okay, well, that's just one of the ways that those cookies crumble. And then they, as the bitter artist does, I waited until they announced who their finalists were. And I'm like, I got to see what was better than me. And I realized, and I went back and I looked at some of like the fine print, I think it was, but you needed to have a female producer on the film in order to be considered, or like a female director or a female writer or something of that sort, which I didn't include in my thing, which oddly enough at the time we did have, but we didn't have anything like that. And they were like, I don't know if that was the reason or not. I'm not saying it was. They might have just said this is a sucky concept, but that the bitter part of me was like, well, motherfucker, why can't you just pick the one that's good? Like, this might have been good. Like, how many ones did you turn down because they didn't have a female on it? And it was one of those instances where that's what makes me kind of jaded about going through a studio system, is that they're doing certain things. Like Joe said, it's I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, it's called virtue signaling, where you do something to give the appearance of political correctness. I don't know what the right words are. Fuck me. But you don't sincerely mean it. And I'm curious to know, like, since you guys have dealt with stuff like that, we all have. I just know it. How has that shaped how you approach competing? I guess I'm asking the same question again, but I don't know. Say what's on your mind.
Did you have any thoughts about that, Joe?
Yeah, I'll just say that, like, so I work at a nonprofit, and internally, the majority of, like, the kind of work we do is, like, equity-based. Like, we throw millions into the community. When COVID happened, we were putting millions into Atlanta to help with paying rent for people. But what's funny is, because the national conversation has become so intense with stuff, it's almost like we come off as inauthentic entering it, even though it's what we do. And I think we do a good job of it, but it's definitely, like, it's really hard.
Yeah, because you're basically having to, like, figure out what is the proper balance of speaking to the audience about this thing and not, like, losing their attention because they're like, they start wondering about the authenticity, right?
Yeah, because I mean, that's such a big question now. I feel like how many people will drop a company if they find out, like, the CEO did some gross shit, or, like,
Yeah, this is something that I've thought about a lot, because I feel like a lot of companies, right, like, where their goal is to generate revenue, generate profit, they're gonna try and find the easiest road to plow. They're not going to, like, go out of the, color outside the lines or whatever. Like, they're not going to go outside of their comfort zone unless they get a signal from the world around them that they need to. And
exactly.
I think a lot of times people respond like, oh, corporations are doing this or whatever as some sort of, like, ploy or whatever, when in reality they're just responding to what they see because they don't want to lose money. They don't want to lose. They don't want to get, like, their show that they spent millions of dollars on canceled in the first season, because they didn't see, this big red light coming from a mile away or whatever. And some, the companies that end up succeeding on doing that are the ones who kind of can see a little bit more ahead of everybody else. So like Disney is a company that really saw ahead of the curve in terms of what was going to be popular in culture, what was going to be the thing that people picked up on, and they got ahead of it, and that's worked out for them. Other companies have had to adjust course and figure out, what are we going to cover, and like there's all sorts of different routes, because the other route that you can do is just to go the opposite way and do none of those things and be like, oh, this is our identity, we're just like the total opposite of what everybody else is doing. So like, I guess my answer to all of this is, because I think the original question this was all predicated on, Zhao, is you were asking in regards to our own work, have we, like, in what ways have we like adjusted our whatever we're doing towards the trends that exist, if at all? Well, so like in Trailer Park Warlock in season 2, I had a relationship that started between two same-sex characters, and for me, like, I wanted to do that because I was interested in doing that story. I was interested in that narrative. I was interested in thinking about it because it's not something that I had done as a writer. So like for me, it was like a way to challenge myself and think more, empathize and think more deeply about, people's lives who are not my own. The way the audience responded to it was either, Yas Queen, or it was like, I can't believe you're fucking doing this. You're ruining my comic forever. I can't read this ever again. Unsubscribed, fuck you. And it's like, for me, I'm just writing a story. Like, I'm not, like, and this kind of goes to what you were saying, Joe, about, authenticity. It's like, the thing about it is, it's very difficult. You can't control people's reaction, right?
No.
You can't control how people are going to respond to what you do. Your authenticity, you have to, assess for yourself whether or not you're being authentic, and let the dice roll as they will, basically.
Yeah. See, I had an issue where I was almost, and it wasn't me trying to be counterculture, it was me trying to adjust to be in culture, which was doing things differently than what's been done before. So for a horror movie, I'm sure you both have heard the terminology of a quote-unquote final girl, which is always the chick at the end of the movie who survived it all and takes on the monster and ends up either winning or getting killed in the last frame right as the credits pop up. And when I had wrote Haunted, I had followed that kind of template for two reasons. One, as a horror movie, it's supposed to have a final girl, like check, like hit that box. And two, like you were saying, Rainwater, I was trying to branch out as an artist where I had done Digits, and it was all about a male character in the lead, straight white male character. And I'm thinking to myself, I got to start writing something different. It's going to be a little boring to me. I want to try and write a female character as the lead, and horror was the perfect place to do that. Now, I named the lead character Taylor, which in the moment of naming her, which was a whole big thing, for any artist who's ever written a story, that that coming up with the name is like the hardest fucking thing to do. It was not done with the implicit decision of making a name that could be unisex, because Taylor could be a guy's name too. Right. At some point during the whole conversation of, we want different things. We want you to change what the tropes are, the cliches, to go against type and do this and that. I had two options laid out in front of me. The first one was, should I make Taylor African American or another nationality? Because black final girls, I've only seen one I think of, which is Jada Pinkett in Tales from the Crypt Demon Knight. I can't think of any others off the top of my head. I think there may have been one in the movie The Descent, but I only watched that movie once and I hated it, so I don't really remember. But other than that, like, I can't really think of final girls who had a different ethnicity that wasn't white. And then the other part of me was like, well, fuck it. Why don't I just make a final guy Why don't I turn the main character into a guy? I mean, it's going to come off as, oh, look, it's the men's rights movement or some bullshit like that. But that wasn't what my mentality was. My mentality was, well, we don't see a guy as the fragile last victim being chased, has to go up against the monster, and maybe that'll be interesting. That'll be different and fresh and new. So I really struggled with it for a while, and I was just like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm just kind of responding to where Rainwater was when he was talking about doing what he wanted to do. And so for me, it just came down to the decision where I was like, all right, I'm going to keep it as a female. And when I go into my casting call, I'm not going in with the mentality of this is a white chick. I'm going in with whichever actress walks into the room first and blows me away with the type of personality that I see this character having, where she's a smart ass and she's got like a cynical tongue and she's like sarcastic and that kind of personality in her that can pull that off and be believable with it. That's the girl I'm going to cast. And oddly enough, there were tons of pretty white girls who walked through the door because, that's what they do. And when the modeling career doesn't work out, and they just didn't have it. And then a Hispanic girl came in, and I hadn't even been thinking about a Hispanic. I was just thinking, oh, it should be an African American. Jordan Peele's big, blah, 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 blah. I was doing the whole I need to compete because Get Out is the big thing right now. I need to have a black. So when she came in and she was Hispanic, I'm like, that's the personality I'm looking for. That's going to be the girl that I want. And you know what I mean? So that's how I ended up solving that problem. But I rode that line of trying to be competitive for competitive sake and also being artistically authentic. So, Joe, you look like you wanted to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, what makes you competitive in that story is that you were open to the casting, because that's kind of what the problem has been. I actually worked I did freelance for a network here that was, one of the movies I did marketing for was Life of a King. It's like Cuba Gooding Jr. It's a chess guy out of prison or something. But one of the things I heard an exec say on the call was when they were trying to cast for that movie, they couldn't think of any good black actors. That's what he said on the call. And I was just like, the guy I was working with looked at me and was like, what the fuck? So he, we get off the conference call. Get off the conference call, and he starts making a list, and he's just like listing off all these actors, and he's like, what the fuck is wrong with them? And I think what you had to think about is like, I guess like the sea change has been that like the public wants more, and so like people are having to like be more open to casting, because like you said, Taylor, that name, that could be anybody, right? And a good casting director is gonna have that openness to like, get the best person.
Yeah.
I don't have the luxury of casting director. It's just me in a rented out community center with my ad on Craigslist, just dealing with all the crazy people who actually look for parts on Craigslist. So I'm looking to, we're getting down towards the final minutes, probably another 20 minutes or so as usual, on this particular episode. So I'm curious to know, we've kind of trashed competition for the most part. We've had some silver linings, but I want to try and end on a positive note. So we've talked about the wonderful addition of deadlines that competitions do give you. As artists who inevitably have to self-promote, it does give that wonderful marketing tool. It does give that temporary validation, ego boost, etc. Are there any other silver linings that you guys can think of that come out of forcing two artists to compete with each other, or multiple artists, I should say?
I guess I'll start and talk about. Long before the webtoon thing, way back when there was a company called Tokyo Pop that would do this competition called the Rising Stars of Manga. And as a kid, this is like high school, I think, this was the shit for me, because like I was into manga. Manga was finally being like like both anime and manga were starting to kind of build a bigger and bigger market in the United States. I wanted to like be a part of that in some way. So like I think this is 14. I submitted like a 13-page story to Tokyo Pop's Rising Stars of manga. It was a complete mess. It was a complete just, I didn't know what I was doing. I've never really, I mean, I had drawn comics before that, but I was trying to do some kind of like, I had been reading Osamu Tezuka, who is this comic artist who does like kind of thoughtful stories, and I was trying to be profound and thoughtful. So like, I did this story that was like about, there's this giant laboratory where like robots of, like white robots and black robots fight each other, and it's like this like they're both the same. So there's like this gray robot who's like the scientist invents, and they kill the gray robot and they keep fighting each other. And I'm like, you know, in my head I'm like, this is genius. This is like you know, usual delusional 14-year-old sort of thinking. It didn't place. It didn't get, I'm sure that they like kind of like looked through it and just tossed it aside because like, what the fuck is this shit? Because ultimately the people who got picked were really good artists who had probably been working on it for years. And, you know, they were probably older than me. They were probably like people who had studied manga way more than I had like done life drawing, all that kind of shit. And for me, like, yes, it was a wound to my like sense of, you know, to my sense of ego and to my sense of pride as an artist. But it was the first time that I'd ever inked a comic. Before then, I had never inked a comic. I'd never like done the whole process to make a comic that was printable. Before that time, I would draw pages and pages of comics that were just penciled. That was it. Like, and I just, in my mind, I was like, you know, I'll get around to it later. I'm sure there's some sort of vague process that I don't understand and don't know anything about, where you can just run pages through a machine and it'll make it automatically look better. And for me, that was the first step into a bigger journey of realizing, oh no, you idiot, like, you have to actually learn every single step of the way. And so I guess to round out what this whole spiel is about, is one of the benefits of competition is it really challenges your assumptions about yourself as, you know, as a craftsperson, as whatever, you
Thinking
know, whether that's
special.
Yes.
Yeah.
It really is a rubber meets the road kind of a thing, and by that, if you're willing to improve, you will improve. Absolutely, you will improve. Whether or not that improvement will lead to accolades or money or any of that stuff, who the fuck knows? But you will improve in terms of your quality if you continue to do it. And that's my positive take on competition in art.
Yeah. I have a positive take in terms of like competition in like a team setting, because that's something that I've kind of seen. Are you guys sports guys at all?
A little bit, but not.
Like, if I say Allen Iverson, do you know who I'm talking about?
Yes. I do.
Okay. So he's like considered, he's probably top 5 for most people. Really great guy. Never won a ring, but he was also like notorious for not being like a team player. Like, he wouldn't show up to practices and blah,
Basketball,
blah.
Rainwater, by the way.
Yeah, basketball. Sorry. But when I think of it in terms of like working on a design team or like just as a group, even in a band too, like it's the same thing goes. Everything kind of, there's like this internal competition that happens between people that I think is healthy if it's going right. And it kind of just pushes everyone to up their game a little bit, because you're not only looking at your competing with yourself, but you're looking at the next guy and you're like, okay, they just did this, so now I got to do this. And when you get to the end, the result is something stronger than anybody would have done on their own. And I think that's like a healthy way of using competition. Like, just you kind of feed off of each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think that's a very valid point. Is that, you know, everyone has that gas tank of creativity or whatever like that, and you know, you use it and then it's gone. But sometimes there's like a quarter left in the tank, and sometimes it's very inspiring when someone's doing something that they love or that they're very passionate about or whatever, and you're like, wow, that guy's getting a really good shot, and I want to make sure that the sound doesn't let that shot down. Like, I want to make sure that you know what I mean? And then the sound guy's talking, and he's like, oh, I need to get really good sound because this shot is phenomenal. I've never seen a cinematographer get this shot. And the actor overhears him and is like, fuck, I cannot fuck up this take. We have to get this right. I have to make sure I'm on point. You know what I mean? Like, it's contagious, I guess.
Yeah.
That's a great way to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, too, like, so I brought up Allen Iverson just to say that, like, in those kind of situations, you don't want to be that guy that's just thinking of, like, how, like, trying to top dog everybody else.
Yeah.
Well, did either of you watch the Michael Jordan?
Oh yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, Rainwater! It's fucking phenomenal.
I need to because I keep hearing people talk about it and it looks really good.
You know, Jordan doesn't so much talk about it as much as his teammates do, but he held them accountable. He was like, if you're showing up, and you're playing at my level. Like, you're not like if Rodman's letting that rebound go, I'm ripping into him, motherfucker. Get in the game. Like, you are not. You're gonna support me, or you know what I mean. Like, and that was his kind of thing. So he kind of led through that team competition. It was kind of like that thing, and like him and Scottie Pippen were all about who was gonna get the most that night and this and that, and like that kind of competition really helped make them thrive. And I think Michael Jordan will tell you he's not Michael Jordan without that team. And he would talk about it. He would talk about the coach. He would talk about, you know what I mean? Like, everybody raised each other's game because they were just, I don't want to say they were necessarily in competition with each other, but it's that neck and neck thing where if one person goes here, I got to match that. And
you brought up Rodman. And he was like a monster at rebounds, which, sorry about the sports analogies.
No,
I'm following. I'm good.
But, it's not like he was trying to like out dunk or out shoot Jordan. He knew his lane was like, all right, I got to do like 15 rebounds tonight. And that's amazing.
I will get 12 concussions to get this rebound. And I don't care if I crash into the people in the front seats in front of me and give one of them a bloody nose and lose a tooth or whatever. He was like set out to be the guy that was going to be like, if Jordan's going to be the guy that everyone's talking about in terms of like leading a team, Rodman wanted to be the guy who was like, nobody gets rebounds like Rodman. And here we are now still saying, I've never seen in basketball a player sacrifice themselves, like their body, as much as Dennis Rodman did to get a fucking rebound, to keep the ball in play. Like, it was insane. And that's kind of the thing. Yeah.
And to transition this to like a comic reference,
all the artist people started listening again.
Yeah, but like in terms of competition, I think some people who don't feel comfortable with it think of themselves as like a direct comparison, and it's really like you have to play your part. So like if you took the Avengers, the Hulk doesn't need to do what Captain America does, right? He has his like spot. And everybody contributes, hopefully. Yeah.
And that's
absolutely.
And I think that's a good takeaway. For me, I think that for the most part, I think that artists, in terms of finding positivity within competition, need to first accept that it is not validation of yourself and your work and your abilities and your value. It is more so just an opportunity to present your work to a fresh audience and nothing more than that. I think that because it's one of those tricky tightropes to walk when you're pinning all of your hopes and dreams on winning something, when the person who read your script or looked at your comic or listened to your song, maybe they just had a bad day and they're not in the mood for that particular thing at that moment in time. That doesn't invalidate all of the work that you did or how great this thing is. It just means that one person didn't get it, wasn't in the mood for it, didn't even look at it. Maybe, you know what I mean? Like there's instances of that where judges will just go, I'll pick this one. And they just grab a random thing. And, you know, you have to realize that people are human. And judges and qualifying committees and all that nonsense are no different. But I think that the positive thing to look at it is it's just an opportunity to present your work to another audience. And this is something that we didn't get into, but this is something that I always valued as something from competitions with festivals and stuff. And I'm sure you guys will back me up on this. Every artist has this particular doubt. When you create something, what is the first fucking thing you do when it's done, kind of near done, close to what you want? You show it to your friends, to your family, to your spouse, whoever it may be, someone in your life. You share it with them and you say, what do you think? And their initial response, I don't give a fuck who they are, I like it. That's it. They always like it. They always like it. They're never going to tell you it sucks. They're never going to tell you that, you know, they don't get it or this or that. Well, sometimes parents will tell you that they don't get it. But the truth is, and I think Rainwater got into this a little bit earlier, though, when he was talking about, you know, it's a kind of a humbling experience. But rejection is an opportunity. That failure is an opportunity, like how I was talking about with Haunted, to reevaluate your own work and to see if, you know, if you're doing what you're intending on doing. So, you know what I'm saying? So that's one of the reasons why, and I should do this more, and this is what I fucking hate. In screenplay competitions, they offer feedback. Like, they'll send you the feedback from the judges, but it always fucking costs more. It's like, oh, $30 to submit, $80 to get your feedback. Motherfucker, just put it in an email. You already have the notes. Just shoot it to me. It's not that.
Seriously.
That to me is when I start getting pissed off. That's the racket. But when you can get it and you can get that validation from a group of people. So like me, when I hit that first festival on Haunted, when I got that first win, I was like, wow, that's really awesome. But then I had to check myself and think, that was one particular set of judges who were looking for one thing. Maybe I should try a couple more festivals and see what happens. And then as you get more and more festivals, more wins, more whatever competition successes, you start, it's not about validating yourself as an artist. It's about validating the fact that you're accomplishing what you set out with your work. Does that make sense? There's a difference that between
Absolutely.
your value and your work's ability to do what you intended, I guess.
Meeting the goal, basically.
Yeah. So it's a good way to kind of indicate to yourself whether or not you're on the right path, I guess.
Yeah.
In terms of what you're trying to accomplish with that work, not as your life in terms of being an artist, but in terms of successfully communicating a concept through an art medium. Like that's the way to look at it. So I mean, it's possible that all the competitions are wrong. It's very possible, however unlikely. And I think a lot of artists need to go in, remove your ego from the whole thing. Try. It's hard. It's really hard. But if you can walk back from humble lane and say, all right, I got to fix some stuff. That's the greatest thing ever, because you're not going to get that from your family and friends. They're going to tell you it's great, and they're going to tell you it's worth $1 million, and you're going to win the Academy Award for this one. And that's no help to you. That kind of criticism is not helpful at all. And I think that the rejection that competition can breed can be the right tool an artist needs if they look at it correctly. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? Do you want to expand or maybe focus my ramblings a little bit better than I did?
Two things. One, my girlfriend is not like that with the criticism.
Oh, lucky
Her
you.
face gives I feel like if I'm like noodling around on guitar or something, I can tell when I'm doing something that's probably crappy. Cause,
she'll close the door and she'll put on headphones or...
Yeah, or start playing a song, and I'm like, all right, I get it. You know, but that's actually helpful. And also,
Yeah.
the other point is, I'm the kind of besides the federated thing, for the most part, when I get rejected, it like pumps me up, and I want to try again.
Oh, okay.
So like, if I'm playing a video game and I lose at something, I'm gonna just kind of keep throwing stuff at it until I do the like get over the hurdle. And I kind of do that with art stuff too. So I think that makes me pretty competitive, and like it works out for me. I don't know how healthy it is, but yeah.
If it makes you, what's the word? Prolific, in terms of creating art, because there's so many people who have ideas that never come to fruition, and you know, if competition forces you to get off your ass and at least make it, then I think it is a healthy habit to have. Rainwater, did you have any thoughts that you wanted to add?
You know, it's interesting because I think I used to be way more competitive in terms of how I saw myself in respect to other artists. So like over time, I feel like I'm starting to look at it as like, okay, I have my particular lane or area that I'm in, and it's different from other people's, and it's not, the comparison just doesn't, it almost seems pointless to a certain extent. And I think it's interesting because I think it's sort of killed some of my momentum to a certain extent, because I have definitely had periods of time where I've like rode on like a competitive spirit of like, oh, you know, I'm going to make this thing and it's going to be great and everybody's going to love it and blah, blah, blah. And after this conversation, it's given me a lot of food for thought, because I'm wondering for myself if I just need to find that area where I haven't looked quite properly yet, you know, where I haven't found somebody who I have that sort of competitive respect, in the sense of I want to be in a place with them where we're kind of going back and forth, because that's always like, so like for instance, like it's not quite competition in the same way, but like, so like when me and Austin were writing Garage Raja, we would have these moments where we're sort of competing with each other for who can come up with like the cooler idea, you know, for like a storyline or something. And so it's this constant like, well, what about this? What about this? And that's always really fun. Like that's like
yeah.
It's, I think one of you had said like it's a kind of a contagious feeling, because it just keeps building and building and building and building. And I don't know if I have that much more to say on it, other than my main takeaway from it is the pros of so the negative of competition, right, is that all that emotional energy can get in the way of the goal sometimes, when you're thinking about accolades, when you're thinking about money, when you're thinking about like
Success,
how can I,
or making it.
Yes, exactly. And the pros of it, the positives of it, is the actual, like when you're in the middle of it, when you're in that feedback loop of like two or more people either outdoing each other or working together in some sort of competitive spirit towards a goal. Like that's always great. And that's like listening to y'all talking about basketball really made me think about it a lot, because that's something I produced Trailer Park Warlock pretty much entirely by myself, with the exception of help from editors, just to kind of like, you know, do proofreading and stuff like that. It's kind of a lonely, like, you know, it's like I have to be my own competition, basically.
Yeah.
You know? And so I'm often competing against past stories. How can I outdo previous stories that I've made? So anyway, I guess I'm saying all that just to say, like, oh, you know, this is giving me a lot of thought in regards to the future and how I do, you know, how I think about
how you use competition as a tool to better yourself. And I think that's the right way to look at it. Is not to look at it as, you know, instantaneous riches or celebrity or whatever like that. It's more about how is this going to make me better as an artist, as a communicator, as a storyteller, whatever it may be.
In fact, at the end of the episode, just to drop this here, I would really recommend, because this is one of those things that has like gotten my a little twinge of competitive spirit, has been seeing Joe do the Kaijun stuff. It's fucking awesome. Like, there's some really great illustrations that he's doing, and I recommend everybody go check it out on his Instagram. But it's just kind of gotten me like a little bit inspired looking at that stuff, because I'm like, oh shit, like that's, especially seeing your process when I'm like seeing you kind of like, you're using pictures of cityscapes as like sort of something to build off on, and then building the composition from that. Like, that's really cool. Like, I never really thought about doing that in that sense.
Thank you. That's so I've had the idea to do illustrations like that for like probably since SCAD. One of my friends that's a photographer asked me to work on something like that with her, and I was afraid to do it then.
Did you have to do it because of just like the idea of tracing over photography, or like?
No, just like my ability at the time. Like I think I said this like every time I'm on here. Like, I don't feel comfortable drawing. So for the most part, I'm pretty confident with whatever I do. But drawing is always like, whatever. But so that said, those have been a way for me to like, how can I be good? How can I get better? And it's like, my color is strong. I think my sense of form is pretty good.
Oh, yeah.
And so cancel out the backgrounds and just focus on the lighting and painting. And all of a sudden you have something pretty good.
All right. Well, I think we've run through this topic pretty well. I'm not going to say we'll probably revisit this topic, although we probably fucking will. Because I always say that at the end of every episode, we could go on and on and on about this. But I definitely thank everybody for tuning in. I hope you took away something from this particular episode, because in my opinion, this has been probably one of the top 3 discussions we've had on this particular
discussion
podcast. And I think there's a lot of stuff that people can take away. And I think this is something that a lot of people deal with or frustrated with, etc., in the art realms. So hopefully we've given you some bright sides to look at or to come out of this show with, and a new outlook on how to use competition to your benefit and not to your same old detriment, I guess. Yeah. And I will hang my hat there. I have been Zhao. Thank you for listening.
Yeah.
Thank you, Joe Bevill, for
just
coming
to
on.
Say, thank you, Joe, for coming on. And I was just going to say, at the end of this podcast, you miss 100% of the shots you never take.
Is that a subtle dig to me for not submitting to that fucking festival? Is that what this is?
No!
That's what it is, Rainwater. God damn you. We'll see you guys next week. Take it easy.